Hey, I'm Paul Perry,
I'm Kim Hartsock, and you're listening to The Wrap,
a Warren Averett podcast for business leaders,
designed to help you access vital business information and trends when you need it.
so you can listen, learn, and then get on with your day.
Now, let's get down to business.
So I want to welcome everybody to The Wrap, where we're specifically talking about higher education. I mean, I know today's colleges and universities, it's an unprecedented array of challenges and threats, right? I mean, there's a lot of enrollment declining. There's a lot of rising costs. Student debt's always in the conversation. So, a lot to talk about and a lot to unpack in this session.
Yeah, and I know that higher ed has certainly weathered crisis before, but maybe this feels like we're moving into a different territory. So we're really excited to have the experts within our firm here with us today. Please welcome Lee Parks and Rick Blanton.
My name is Lee Parks, and I'm with the Montgomery office and work in the public sector, Warren Averett. I specialize in state and local governments, not-for-profits, and institutions of higher education.
I'm Rick Blanton. I work in the Montgomery office as well. I also work a great deal in not-for-profits, institutions of higher education, and state and local governments. We had some thoughts about what Paul mentioned about the historically colleges.
Yeah, historically, colleges and universities have relied on a traditional model where enrollment, state and local appropriations, contributions basically funded the operations. COVID came in and kind of disrupted the apple cart. All of a sudden, the people were sent home. Schools were initially locked down. The government came in and did what they needed to do and provided a lot of stimulus money to get everybody through this. So the past couple of years, that has kind of been just a big Band-Aid and allowed everybody to get through the issue. And now we're kind of coming out of this, and everybody is kind of looking at where they're going to be positioned once the stimulus money runs out. It's going to be interesting to see where the various institutions are and how they position themselves moving forward.
Well, Lee, there's been a lot of changes from COVID. Not all of them terrible, but you mentioned some right there with funding. And, with that, the traditional student has changed some too for colleges. I mean, I know the workforce in general has. So many more people are looking at working, realize they could work from home, realize they could learn from home. And so I think that impacts a lot of the offerings. And when you talk about the traditional model that focuses so much on enrollment, the programs and even the structure and how it's provided has really been revamped in the last couple of years. And I don't know, I wonder, is that going to stick? I think there's going to be certainly a segment of that population that expects that offering to continue.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. You're not only talking about online learning, but just the commuters, the traditional student that comes to college and lives in a dorm or on campus housing and stays for 4 or 4+ years and graduates. That is probably going to be a lot less than it was in the past. Now like you said, you've got not only online learning, but people who are working and going to class at night and working around that. So it's definitely going to be different.
You mentioned about the funding and kind of the Band-Aid approach that the federal government took, and thank goodness that they did. And I think that'd be a good time to mention something that all of our clients, or the vast majority of them, are hearing about, is employee retention credits. Everybody has heard about them. A lot of our clients are getting phone calls and emails, and it's really come down to people beating down their doors, talking to them about it. And one of the things that our clients in particular really have to be concerned about is you mentioned state appropriations and federal funding and things like that, where those initial expenses are covered by. And our clients, especially the higher education ones and not-for-profits, have to be really cognizant of potentially double dipping if somebody decides to pursue one of those tax credits, because these people that are reaching out, they are unconcerned with our clients' well-being and their future. So it becomes, the onus is on our clients to determine whether they even have a possibility, because they could be jeopardizing future funding. And so that's, when you mentioned Band-Aid, it made me think about it. That's one that may be harder to rip off. You could lose a lot of hair in that Band-Aid. So just thought.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like the overall business strategy of colleges and universities is being forced to shift. Some of this was already in the works prior to the pandemic, but maybe was escalated or exacerbated. But talk to me a little, Lee, about the overall business strategies and what are leaders within these higher education institutions, what are they thinking about? What are they focused on as they shift their business strategies?
Well, I think, as we're transitioning out and the stimulus money is drying up, they're going to have to start focusing back on their budgets and trying to live a life without the stimulus. Obviously, enrollment and the state and local funding, that will continue to be important, but really just trying to hone in your expenses and get back to operating, probably a leaner operation, trying to grow enrollment. But one thing we have seen is enrollment. They're trying to grow enrollment at a cost. So when colleges and universities provide scholarships to students to come, they can be funded in different ways. Some are externally funded by an endowment or a gift. And then some are funded internally, where the schools is basically paying for that person to attend. So they need to be careful about trying to get too aggressive in trying to grow enrollment at a cost. So that's going to be a difficult play because there's no benchmark. Every institution is different when it says, well, what's your discount rate, which is the percentage of your scholarships compared to tuition revenue, and it's hard because everybody is different, and it really, a lot of that depends on if it's a externally funded scholarship or an internally funded scholarship.
You talked about kind of a lean organization. I mean, I would imagine that staffing has to be different. There has to be new challenges, new opportunities as it relates to the staffing of these colleges and universities. Have you seen that with some of the clients you've talked to, or what is the industry looking for there?
No, I think that's definitely a good point. Staffing, as a whole, it's an issue. But we all know that the cost of employees has been driven up, and that's a direct impact on the bottom line,
especially at the professional level.
Yeah, not only the cost, but the getting staff is difficult. Especially in a let's just take the finance office or financial aid office. So those two kind of come to mind initially, but it's a really difficult market right now, and it's competitive, and it's hard to keep. That
really speaks to that budgeting that you're talking about, Lee. You're talking about running a leaner operation when some would say your most important inputs, your people, are at an all-time high. And the marketplace is just kind of drained the pool of whom you'd like to have. And then also that kind of affects enrollment as well. When you think about staffing and employment as a whole, I read something the other day in the Wall Street Journal. McDonald's expects their average pay to be $15 an hour next year. And we all kind of consider that like the baseline, a job at McDonald's. That's what you could get just right out of the gate. And that's now impacting students' choices about
good point,
whether they want to jump off this road, a 4-year education or even 2-year of education. They start thinking about what they're giving up because these employers are just making it really hard for them to make that personal investment without the initial upfront drive. I feel like the higher institutions are kind of getting it from both sides right now.
Yeah, that's a really good point. When somebody's coming out of high school and looking at the return of investment of a college degree, and these days 4 years is kind of just a minimum. Most require a master's or learning success. So when looking at that, $15 an hour job is hard to. That being the baseline.
Yeah, the minimum.
That can
That's a really good point.
Decisions.
And certainly, as you look at, if you look at someone who's having to face the obstacle of paying for college versus starting out working immediately, so you're not only delaying 4 years of earning income, but you're now adding an expense, right? So it's doubling the impact as cost of going to college increases. It's making it more difficult. But and I can see that.
Fortunately, some businesses, they're having staffing issues as well. So we're seeing some businesses offering an incentive to current staff or future staff to come in, and they may assist in the cost of the education with the requirement that they stay with a certain amount of years after. So that does help a little bit. That everybody's kind of feeling the staffing pinch.
Some of our higher education clients are reaching out to industry to see what the highest and best use of what they're putting out an educated student ready for a career is, so that they know they're putting out the kind of people that the employment makes sense, the college makes sense based on the employment headed that way. I think that kind of proactive approach between industry and higher education is maybe part of the answer to that business strategy.
Want to receive a monthly newsletter with Wrap topics?
Then head on over to warrenaverett.com/the wrap and subscribe to our email list to have it delivered right to your inbox.
Now, back to the show.
And I'm sure, just like every business and every sector of the economy had to shift during the pandemic to utilize technology, I know that the colleges and universities were not immune to that. They had to adapt to that as well. And with all that we're talking about, you see more and more people offering a virtual MBA and a web, program. So talk to me a little bit about how technology is factoring into this shift that higher ed institutions are going through as well.
Well, I think technology obviously is, like you said, it's not just online learning. It's everything has gone as far as student access to records and study materials and grades and everything related to the school. It has shifted to technology online, and the security definitely becomes an issue. And I would do it disjustice, so I'm going to defer to Paul. Why don't you talk a bit about it? It's in my opinion, everybody's at risk.
Yeah, I mean, and I would say that, from a security perspective, anything that's accessible through the internet is obviously adding a risk. So universities probably had a lot of vulnerabilities as it related to their technology in the past, but once you put absolutely everything online and everything's accessible, it's even a bigger threat or a bigger vulnerability for them. So they're probably having to shift what they do. And you talk about running a lean shop, doing good security is not cheap, right? You've got to put some funds to it, and you've got to have governance's buy-in on adding that expense. And so, yeah, it's definitely going to play into enrollment. It's going to play into how everybody works and how everybody interacts, and you get the more security you put in there, the less convenient it makes accessing things for people. So yeah, it's definitely no industry is immune to higher expenses around security. So yeah, I'm pretty sure universities are gonna have an issue there as well.
Paul, let me ask you this: let's just say a college that may have not done the investment of the infrastructure prior to this, and then all of a sudden the demand of the technology network has significantly grown, so you may be operating at 100+ capacity on that network. Does that open them up from more to risk?
I mean, it absolutely does. And, for universities that are listening to this and thinking about, well, where do I get started? It's that quick risk assessment. Where are we most vulnerable? Let's fix that first. A lot of people get get overwhelmed and they say, hey, I can't fix it all at once, so I'm not going to fix any of it. That's not the way to approach it. It's, step by step, do something different this month, this year.
Yeah.
But really focus the higher risk areas. But
Sure.
You're right, Lee. It's definitely opening up them more to the vulnerabilities out there. And, the cyber criminals are not focused. Sometimes they have a moral code that says, I'm not going to go after universities. I'm not going to go after children. I'm not going to go after hospitals. But there's a lot that say, I don't know who I'm going after. I know there's a vulnerability. I'm going after that. It could be a mom and pop down the street. It could be a university. I don't know the answer to that. So you really have to kind of take that with a quote unquote grain of salt. And you can't assume just because I'm a university, they're not going to go after us.
Sure. And, I think that since they've moved from the use of Social Security numbers as the primary identification for students, and now they do student ID, some institutions think, well, that's kind of relieved me of my responsibility. That's really not the case.
Right. Because, I can easily find that out. And it's probably a portion of a Social Security number. It's probably got a little bit other things to it. But if I can figure one person's out, I may can figure others out. So, yeah,
it definitely linked to a bank account somewhere. So
absolutely. Yeah. Lots of vulnerabilities out there.
So Lee and Rick, there's a lot going on here, and it's a very dynamic situation for higher education institutions. Here on the Wrap, we like to wrap it up in 60 seconds or less. What's the one thing you would leave listeners with, the leaders of these organizations, for them to have success in the future?
Well, I think that's a great question, Kim. To try to narrow it down to 60 seconds is very difficult. I think we're all trying to walk through this time together. Obviously, like we mentioned, I think, getting your budget honed down, focusing on enrollment and other funding sources. Obviously, technology is huge. Getting that risk assessment, penetration analysis performed. Rick, do you have any other things that you want to add?
Lee, you've done a great job summarizing that. I'd say the awareness of all those things you just mentioned and keeping them in your horizon line when looking at things like budgeting and making your strategies for the next year and the coming years, being aware of all those items and how they could impact your university is probably the single biggest thing. It's a broad approach, and it takes a lot of awareness to do it.
You're really focusing on 5-year plan as opposed to a 1-year plan.
Absolutely.
Well, like every other industry, it's not business as usual, and I think you guys have mentioned that and really expounded on that. So, Lee, Rick, it's a pleasure to have y'all on the podcast with us, and we appreciate you being here.
No, thank y'all. We appreciate y'all including us.
Thank you so much, Paul. Kim, we enjoyed it.
Thank you all. Great to see you.
Y'all take care.
Talk soon.
Bye. Bye-bye.
And that's a wrap. If you're enjoying the podcast, please leave a review on your streaming platform.
To check out more episodes, subscribe to the podcast series, or make a suggestion of other topics you want to hear.
Visit us at warrenaverett.com/the wrap.